This video is designed to help you see with crystal clarity how the 4Cs framework, based on a book I wrote with Dr. Ivan Meisner, and now has expanded to 4 new books, one on each C, can help members at the individual level in BNI and also can help the collective, the chapter and BNI as an organization. First, a brief about my history. So when I was 27 years old, my father walked into my clinic and he said, "Son, I really like what you've done with the place, but it's missing one thing." And I said, "What's that, Dad?" And he said, "Patience. This place is empty." I said, "But Dad, you got to give people time to find out about me. I'm the new kid on the block." He said, "Son, that's your first mistake. You don't wait for people to find you. You go out there and you network." Problem was, I was a terrible and terrified networker. And I also was not a very comfortable public speaker, to say the least. I remember one night shaking and shivering in bed at the idea of networking. Someone had mentioned that BNI would be a great place to go. And that night, I literally couldn't sleep all night, imagining how daunting it would be to show up the next day and network. But see, I had competing fears because I also had the fear of not being able to pay my bills and failing as an entrepreneur. I was a 27-year-old chiropractor in Toronto, Canada. But there was a quote that I heard from Jim Rohn that changed everything. That morning when I woke up, I looked outside. It was pitch black. It was cold. It was Canada. And Jim Rohn's quote hit me because I wasn't going. And the quote was, "Unsuccessful people are not willing to do what successful people are." And that was all I needed. I got out of bed, and at crazy o'clock, I visited BNI. And of course, it changed my life. But I learned very, very quickly that it's one thing to get out there and network, but it's another thing to get out there and network effectively. And I was just constantly, over the decades of as being in BNI and networking at large, I was always questioning and wondering, what is the difference between effective and ineffective networking? And I realized that, especially in my early days, when I wasn't getting any business, that the only thing worse than not getting referrals is not knowing why. And as I evolved as a networking professional and now developed an extensive, vast international network, I'm doing a movie next year with Dr. Ivan, with Brian Tracy, with John DiMartini, Joe Vitale. As you know, we're in the movie The Secret. I realized that the only thing better than gaining referrals and gaining business is knowing precisely why it's happening. I mean, I went from that empty clinic to a multi-million-dollar center, but because I understood why, I was able to package it and now teach people about it. I remember when I first spoke to Dr. Ivan about the idea, about the 4Cs, he was all in with endorsing the book. But then I said, no, I actually was wondering if you want to co-author it, and I'm so grateful that he did. So the 4Cs is challenging the existing way that we look at networking. Because the traditional models, although they've been around for a long time, they're not actually complete, and I'm trying to stretch people beyond them. Let's look at the first model, know, like, and trust. So know, like, and trust says people do business with you because they know you, like you, and trust you. Well, if this was the case, then your number one source of business should come from your innermost circle because, of course, they know, like, and trust you the most. But for most business professionals, in fact, I've spoken to 900 people in the Philippines, 800 plus in Vietnam, and almost not a single hand went up. Almost not a single hand. I think it was one or two. When I said, how many of you get the majority of your business from your innermost circle? Now look, in the inception period of a business, your number one investors, the number one source of fans, they're going to come from your innermost circle of family and friends. But if you look at the longevity of a business, it's negligible. The second thing is, we know in business that communication is so vitally important, yet the know, like, trust model doesn't speak to communication at all, doesn't acknowledge it at all. Even the law of reciprocity, which is such a powerful law in the BNI world with givers gain, it's at risk of losing its hold and its power and relevance. Because if you think about it, People aren't going to refer to you, even if you've given and given and given, unless they are confident in you as a business professional. And what I believe, unless you can tick these 4 boxes, the 4 C's in the minds of others, they're not going to risk their reputation and refer to you. They just can't. So while it is human nature to want to help people, it's also human nature to want to protect your existing relationships and your reputation you have with others and not refer the wrong person to them. The 3-step rollout is DNA. Discover the 4 C's, navigate the 4 C's, and apply the 4 C's. So let's get into what the 4 C's are. The 4 C's are the 4 boxes you got to tick in the minds of others before you can expect a steady stream of referrals. The first C is competence. People aren't going to refer to you unless you reach a certain threshold of competence. They say that competence gets your foot in the door. And competence I refer to as trusting you on a professional level. However, if competence gets your foot in the door, credibility keeps you in the room. So credibility is trusting you on a personal level, on a human level. But you know people in B&I who tick these first 2 boxes, but they have what I call a deficiency in the 3rd C, which is clarity of communication. And when they're not communicating with clarity, even if they are competent and credible, you just don't understand them. So you're not going to test them and do business with them. And you don't understand what they do enough to be able to communicate to others to open doors for them. Finally, the 4th C is connectivity, which refers to the quantity and the quality of your connections. And when I shared the 4th C with a royal family member in Bahrain, she said, Odie, this might be the most important C of all. Now, if you think of it, right, when someone perceives you at a networking event in your B&I chapter to be well-connected, if they see you or perceive you to be well-connected in the community, they have an ambition to want to rub shoulders with you and potentially do and refer business to you. That's just human nature. And when someone perceives you to be disconnected, leaning against the wall in the corner like a teenager, they wonder, does this person even want to connect with me? And are they even worthy of connecting with, like it or not? Although you may want to go over there and save them, it's not like you're drawing a crowd standing in the corner. So these are the 4 C's. And many members leave B&I because they don't think networking works, their particular network in that chapter works, and they may even question whether Giver's Gain works. But the truth is, it might be that they're not signaling these 4 key qualities that makes it easier for people to choose them as a go-to person to do business with and refer business to. So we tick the discover. Navigate the 4 C's involves running an anonymous peer-to-peer assessment, whereas an entire chapter can anonymously assess one another. And each member would get a scorecard. They're going to see how they assess themselves, because you do that first, for each C. And then they're going to get a scorecard that reflects how their peers perceive them for each C and combined. And what they got the luxury of doing now is, with the app we created, they get a variance report or variance summary that shows the degree of difference between how they perceive themselves and where they stand in the eyes of their peers. It reveals a perception gap. And so if a member scored themselves very high on clarity and their peers assessed them very low on clarity of communication, then of course we know, or this member knows rather, that their peers aren't really getting them. Their message isn't landing. And that might be the very reason why they may be giving and giving, but not receiving. So as you can see, we can actually eliminate the gap that exists between givers and gain, right? Because it's giver's gain, right? There's no space between the 2 words. But if someone's giving and not receiving, it could very well be, because they're not signaling clarity and the other C's, or a combination of them. What a member also gets is a group average score, which tells them how the group average for all the C's scored each other, and on the individual C's as well, which means they can compare their individual score to whether they're above, below, or on par with the group average. On a chapter level, we can also determine deficiencies, right? Just like a member can. Because if a chapter overall, their lowest C, and it's low significantly compared to the others, let's say it's credibility, we know this chapter has trust issues. If they scored low on clarity, we know this chapter has communication issues. And the beauty is, when multiple chapters run these assessments in a region, we can also gauge caliber of chapters, right? We know that a certain chapter is high caliber and is probably the best chapter to be a showcase chapter. This also means if a high caliber chapter is more likely going to impact the visitor experience, because when an individual and a chapter develops their C's, then when people visit, when visitors, come for a first time or a second time, they are probably going to be impressed with the level at which these individuals are signaling competence, credibility, clarity, and connectivity. And they might be wondering, I'd love to be associated with these kind of people. I'd love to step up my game. So that's to discover the 4 C's as a framework, navigate the 4 C's through assessments, which allow to isolate, uncover individual and group level, collective level deficiencies. But then the A for apply the 4 C's, coaching, training, and resources, allows us now to empower a member and empower a chapter. So what the apply phase or the action phase is about is, number one, giving members an opportunity to work in the best way that they learn on their deficiencies. So they may want to read because they like to learn at their own pace and on their own time. Techniques to develop the C's, understanding how we define the C's, what the components of the C's are, how they highlight and black out the other C's, in other words, how the C's interact, and much more. Now, there's some individuals that learn best through one-to-one coaching, and that's when we can offer, individualized, customized coaching for an individual to now empower their deficiencies or maintain their scores if that's what they're after. And I know that if this gets out there at a global level, then we're going to have to empower people on the ground, not just online. So we're going to need to put coaches out there that are certified in the 4 C's framework, and that certification starts December 8th. And finally, there's people that learn best through groups, and groups that want to learn, not just individuals that want to join a random group, but groups that want to go through the training together. And that's when we can customize 4 C's deep dive trainings on each of the C's. So this is the 4 C's overall as a paradigm. And the beauty is, what we're going to be doing as well with the app, it's already available, is when members reassess and chapters reassess, we can actually see from assessment to assessment how each of the C's are trending. So for an individual member, they'll be able to see that, okay, my clarity is trending upwards. My competence is maintained. I maintain my scores there. And maybe I'm trending downwards in one of the C's because I've let up. I stopped putting the pedal to the metal in terms of empowering that C. And so we can see the individual and the chapter's evolution with the 4 C's tracking on the assessment tool. What's also interesting is we can correlate the evolution of an individual member's C's with their thank you for closed business received and with their referrals received. So what we're sharing with members is that, look, it's not the network that doesn't work. It's that you need to optimize how you work it. And when you do, you're not only going to have a shift in the perception from in the perception of in the eyes of your peers, but you're also going to be able to tangibly get results. And that means impacting the longevity of this member. And as a chapter as well, we're going to be able to see the chapter overall as improving with a collective thank you for closed business. And what we should also see on the global scale, regional and global and national scales, are more retention, more members, and potentially an acceleration towards the 1 million member mark, and not just, touching the rim and reaching 1 million members, but growing beyond that and scaling in numbers that are almost unfathomable at this stage. So this is the 4Cs. The beauty is with the app, we can also look at multi-levels. We can look at the national levels and countries that are performing the best since the 4Cs have been introduced. We can look at regions that are performing at their best within a country since the introduction of the 4Cs. We can see chapters that are performing at their best since the introduction of the 4Cs. And we can measure all kinds of things, from retention to filling chapters and to launching chapters. So right now it's probably just a great sounding theory, but I believe, like many have, from high-level B&I executives to national directors, executive directors, even the members, are really looking at this as a very robust framework for impacting member results, chapter results, and of course results at the regional, national, and global levels. And when members understand the importance of the 4Cs, all the activities that B&I encourages, the power of one, bringing referrals, bringing visitors, doing one-to-ones, CEUs, all of that, and showing up on time, taking on leadership roles, being present on a regular basis, all of those activities become meaningful to them. Because while members are encouraged to do all that stuff, many members think, whether they express it or not, I joined this network to build my business, and now B&I wants me to grow a chapter and grow their business. But you can overcome that by getting them to see the relevance of their activities. Don't even saying it. They will see that, wow, doing these activities actually offers an opportunity to highlight, to showcase my Cs. So in essence, you're getting B&I members to follow through on the very things we want members to do, but for their own reasons. If you'd love to see the 4Cs reach your region, put it to the test, and see the kind of results that we could get, I would love to discuss this further with you and do a deeper dive. Thanks for listening.